Toxicity in relationships occurs because of a myriad of things such as jealousy, envy, manipulation, emotional abuse, and worst of all, physical violence. Toxicity can happen in any relationship between two individuals, whether it is a friendship, romantic relationship, or familial relationship. What are some ways to fix these relationships or get out of these relationships? Stopping all possible contact in any relationship can be hard and seem almost impossible. You should strive not to have to block all communication channels, but sometimes you may have to. Starting small and limiting communication may be a good place to start, and then slowly disengage more and more with that toxic partner or friend. Knowing your value is essential to leaving a toxic relationship. There are many different components of the self that combine to help one know their worth. Put yourself first in this instance and prioritize your emotional health and well-being ahead of anyone or anything else. If you struggle with this, think of how you would advise a friend who is in or wanted to get back into a toxic relationship and heed your own advice. The issue with constant online communication in any relationship is that it is nonverbal and therefore can lead to mixed messages and an inability for the different parties to pick up on nonverbal cues such as vocal cues and facial expressions. When it comes to instant messaging through texting, Snapchat, Facebook Messenger, etc., and you are trying to deal with conflict, it can be best to do so offline. If you have to communicate online, though, here are some ways to better manage your communication during conflict. Wait and reread. Waiting and giving your mind some time to calm down after receiving a provoking message can be extremely helpful in keeping and maintaining relationships rather than responding right away with an answer that is hurtful or toxic and can potentially damage the relationship permanently. Assume the best and watch out for the worst. If you receive a provoking message, just assume that with all the difficulties posed by communicating through technology, that the other person meant well but didn't express themselves in the right manner. This only applies if you personally know the sender, though. Communication online with unknown people can be very toxic from the get-go, and this is due to the idea of invisibility, or other words, sending nasty, toxic messages because we will likely never meet the receiver. When we communicate online, we are less able to read feedback off the person we are talking to. Being unable to perspective take means we are less able to, or less likely to experience empathy and read the appropriateness of our messages and expressions of our emotional displays. By being able to perspective take, we can see where we might have crossed a line and be able to correct the appropriateness of our messages and emotional displays. This greatly helps to build a line of cooperative communication versus destructive communication. By communicating offline about a conflict, you can communicate directly with the other party and read their facial expressions, body language, and vocal cues. Listening is our most primary communication skill. We develop the ability to listen well before we can write, read, and talk. However, nowadays it seems that people do not listen to understand, but rather they listen to reply. There are 5 reasons or purposes for listening, and they are to comprehend, discern, analyze, appreciate, or to show support, and that's it. So if we listen with an intent on replying right away, we will never get the full scope of the conversation or what is being said. The 5 purposes for listening change frequently even during the same conversations. Conversations are fluid, constantly changing, and evolving, and so adapting to these changes mid-conversation is a must for cooperative communication. To help yourself with this practice, consciously ask yourself what the purpose of this conversation is or what the purpose of the listening activity is and adjust accordingly. Selective listening is when we subconsciously take in what is immediately important or pressing during an encounter or conversation and disregard the rest. Selective listening is the hardest habit to overcome when becoming a more competent listener. It is a result of changes in attention and what we find to be prominent or pressing in the encounter at hand. Understanding this is a key as you can increase your level of active listening by being more attentive to the entirety of a conversation and focusing on the total message and not just bits and pieces. Narcissistic listening is when we try to actively or intentionally redirect or change the direction of conversation onto us and as an individual and our own interests. If the topic or conversation stays on this individual, they would generally be positive, but can turn extremely negative once the conversation changes direction. To correct this, allow the conversation to run its course and away from you, but continue to stay engaged and stay positive. Becoming an active listener is the most important aspect of communication as it creates opportunities and possibilities for us that are endless. Eliminating the aforementioned habits is a great start to becoming a better listener. Here are a few more. Concentrate on important aspects of encounters and control factors that impede your attention. Develop an awareness of your primary listening functions in various situations. and practice shifting your listening style quickly depending on the demands of the encounter.